Hello fabric friends, welcome back to the AGF channel for another fun quilting tips video. If you missed my last quilting tips video, make sure to click the I in the right hand corner of this video to learn the basics on how to quilt as you go. Also, thanks so much for all the love in that video, and there were so many questions in the comments that I'd like to cover in today's video. In today's video, we'll be learning how to attach our quilt as you go blocks in two different ways. We'll be learning how to do the stitch in the ditch method and the binding strip method. Since December is in full swing and Christmas is my favorite holiday, I decided to sew up some holiday-inspired blocks and turn them into table runners to decorate my home. To sew up these adorable free patterns, make sure to check out the description box below to download these adorable free patterns. All right, makers, let's get started. The first method to attach your quilt as you go blocks I'm going to show you is the stitch in the ditch technique. For this method, you can use the scrappy quilt blocks you created from the part 1 Quilt As You Go video tutorial I made, or you can use blocks you've created that has ended up in your unfinished projects pile. Place your block on a piece of batting and quilt using decorative stitches, straight lines, or free motion quilting. Get creative choosing your quilting motif, or keep it simple. I decided to quilt each block with a different decorative stitch for extra texture and interest. Once you got all your blocks quilted, trim off the excess batting and trim all your blocks to the same size. Now all we have to do is place our blocks in the order that we enjoy and sew each block with right sides together at 1/4 inch. I'm creating a table runner, but if you want to create a quilt from these blocks, sew your rows together just like we sewed each block together. Create whatever size finished project you like, making sure to press your seams open to create as less bulk as possible. Grab your backing fabric and place your quilted piece on top. Stitch in the ditch by sewing on each seam line that was created by sewing each block and row together. For extra cuteness and to really make sure my backing was secure, I also stitched in the ditch by tracing the seam lines of each Christmas tree. Pin your quilted top and backing together and have fun practicing stitching in the ditch. With my needle in the middle position, I lined up my presser foot with my seam line and tried my best to stitch right on top of each seam line. But don't worry if it's not perfect, it's still going to look amazing. Trim off your excess backing and your table runner or quilt will be ready to be bound. But before I bind my quilts, I like to stitch 1/4 inch around my project to make sure the stitches are secure and won't unravel. The back of your project will show off your stitching in the ditch and will be more minimalistic, whereas the front of your project will be the main attraction. The second method you can use to attach your quilt as you go blocks is the binding strip method. For this method, quilt your blocks by placing your blocks on a piece of batting and placing some backing underneath. For my quilting motif, I decided to keep this one more simple and used wavy lines on each block, with some going horizontal and the other going vertical. Once you got your blocks quilted, trim and square them up so they all are the same size. For this method, you will have the same quilting on the front and back of your blocks. But in order to sew your blocks together, you will have to use a 1-inch strip of fabric. Cut some 1-inch strips in the fabric of your choice, and place one strip on the right side of your block, and place another strip on the back side of your block, lining the edges up with the raw edge of your blocks. Use some wonder clips to secure both strips to your block. Sew at 1/4 inch to secure the strips to your block. Trim off any excess strip to get a piece that looks like this. To attach your blocks, place 2 blocks back sides together and line the back strip up with the back side of your block. Move your seam allowance out of the way and sew at 1/4 inch to connect the back strip to your block. Now your piece should look like this, with a nice finished seam in the back of your blocks, and the front of your blocks should look like this. Your seam allowances should butt up against each other just perfectly. And now we need to fold over the raw edge of your strip and fold it over the raw edge of your seams, lining up the folded edge to the stitch line. Use an iron to make sure everything lays nice and flat. Feel free to add a few pins to keep everything into place. To secure your binding strip, try using a blanket stitch or straight stitch, making sure to sew as close to the folded edge as possible. Repeat this process to attach the rest of your blocks in rows, and you will have a finished runner or quilt using the Quilt As You Go method. With either method you choose, you can't go wrong, but give both a try to find out which one's your favorite. Oh my goodness, I had so much fun creating these two table runners using two different quilt as you go methods. I know when I first started quilting, making a quilt sandwich and quilting a whole quilt under my sewing machine was such a daunting task. So with these two different quilt as you go methods, it makes the quilting process a little less scary and a little bit more manageable, especially if you're new to quilting. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, make sure to give it some love and give it a thumbs up and share it with all your sewing friends. And I'll see you in the next tutorial. Until next time, happy sewing.